behind me is one of the world's most dominant predators, and they live around you too, because wading birds like this great egret have conquered every inhabited country on Earth. From birds that have spread around the world like wildfire to hunters that craft their own tools, today we're showing you the most extreme wading birds in America.
My name is Harrison, and this is my twin brother, Evan. We're on a mission to figure out what the most extreme animals in the world really are and document them all while we still can. And you can't talk about extreme birds without bringing up the wading birds. These are top predators everywhere from the planet's greatest wetlands to our literal backyards. And they have more to teach us about our world than you'd expect. Waders have a lot of contenders for the list we're developing of America's most extreme birds. But we have to start with the heron so impressive that anyone in the country could recognize it.
The great blue heron is probably our best-known wading bird in the United States because they're so widespread and so abundant that pretty much anyone in the country could stand to have an encounter with them at some point. And what makes them instantly recognizable is their size, because the great blue is actually the largest heron in the Americas. They can grow up to 140 centimeters tall, that's about 5 feet, and their wingspan can reach up to 200 centimeters, which is over 6 feet long. So their wingspan is literally larger than we are tall, and because they're so large, they can really have their pick of what kind of prey they eat, the hunting grounds that they'll use, and even nesting sites that are available to them. They're large and strong enough to hunt literally any kind of food they want in these wetlands. They'll take large fish, tons of reptiles and amphibians. We've seen them catch huge armored catfish and even snakes. But there are records of great blue herons eating all sorts of birds, bird eggs, and even small mammals. And they're big enough to compete with the other predators out here too. They're strong enough to fight off eagles and ospreys and other herons for food. So they're really able to defend their territories when they have a good area to hunt. And one of the other advantages of a large body size is that they're more tolerant of the cold than other species, and they're even able to overwinter farther north in the US, even back home in Pennsylvania where we are from. So we get to see these birds all year round, even in the winter when a lot of sightings slow down. Great blue herons are perfect proof of the fact that wading birds are not only predators, but they're high-level predators that are right at the top of their ecosystems.
Blue herons are kind of the prototypical wading bird, but with over 110 species found around the world, this is a much more diverse group than people realize. Wading birds are all long-legged, long-necked hunters that live mainly in wetlands, but each one has evolved a different crazy way to solve their biggest problems, like getting enough food and not becoming someone else's. And we're documenting all of these extreme animals on our life list to learn what we can from them about how to solve the huge problems we humans are facing right now. Wading birds are definitely learning from us too, because one egret you may have seen before has used us to conquer the entire planet.
Cattle egrets are an interesting case because they're not originally native to the United States, but you wouldn't really know it because now they've become the most abundant wading bird in the entire country. They're native to Africa, Asia, and parts of southern Europe, but funnily enough, thanks to human development and agriculture, they've been able to spread all across the world, and they're now found on every continent except Antarctica. And what's really impressive is how fast they were able to do that. Cattle egrets have one of the fastest and largest natural range expansions of any bird in history, because uniquely among the wading birds here in the US, cattle egrets mostly focus on foraging on land. They mostly eat insects and other terrestrial arthropods, and it's much easier for them to find that kind of prey when you have huge grazing animals disturbing the landscape and scaring everything out. They've really learned to work smarter, not harder, but it's paid off massively for them because when they hunt around livestock, they've been found to be nearly 4 times more successful than when they're hunting alone, because all those big animals are disturbing the grass and kicking up all the insects that the birds are feeding on. And they've even developed a symbiotic relationship with the cattle where they'll climb on the cow's back and pick off little parasites like ticks or mosquitoes, which of course benefits the birds because they're getting a meal, and it keeps their hosts clean of parasites, so it really works out for both sides. Now, the distribution of cattle egrets is really impressive, but they're not the only wading birds that have made their way around the world.
Far from it, actually. There are a bunch of wading birds that live on every continent except Antarctica, and every country on Earth has at least one native wader. That's what we mean when we say they're one of the most successful bird groups to ever live. They're thriving in pretty much every wetland ecosystem on the planet, and now many of them are even expanding their range as climate change creates new breeding habitats they can use. One of the biggest challenges wading birds have faced in their push for global domination is fierce competition with each other, because there's only so much prey and so many hunting spots available. But there's one very odd species who has figured out the perfect solution.
The unique thing about limpkins is that even though they don't look that different from other wading birds out here, they're in a completely separate family. They're actually the only living members of the family Aramidae, and the majority of their food is one thing: snails. At least 70% of the diet of limpkins is made up of apple snails, the largest freshwater mollusks in the US. They will eat some other snails, crustaceans, and things like that, but really most of what they're eating are these large apple snails, and they've specialized their feeding method to focus on this prey as well. Their beaks look a bit odd, but the slightly curved shape and the weird beak tip basically serves like forceps to allow them to pull snails right out of their shells, and it takes them less than 10 seconds per snail, because what they do is they reach in, cut the adductor muscle that keeps the snail shell shut, and then they can pull it out without an issue. And because of this hyper-specialized feeding style, it basically means that they face no competition when they're trying to eat, which gives them a major advantage over a lot of the other waders here. But that does raise an interesting question. How do all the other wading birds out here solve that problem? Most wading birds aren't beating competition by specializing what they eat, but instead they're focusing on how, where, and when they hunt. And the first major group to look at are the visual hunters, things like herons and egrets. Those are your birds with long, straight beaks that they use like spears for both active and ambush hunting. And when they're using that method, they will take just about anything they can find. Exactly. They'll eat everything from fish and invertebrates to frogs, reptiles like snakes and turtles, and depending on the species, even birds and small mammals. But each species has its own preferred hunting method that allows them to partition the resources in the habitat a little bit better. Right, so something like a tricolored heron or a snowy egret are smaller, so they're mostly focusing on either the water's edge or super shallow, well-vegetated sections, and then your larger species like great egrets or great blue herons are a little bit taller, so they have access to the wider and deeper sections where bigger prey items like turtles or larger fish will move through. But maybe the most impressive strategy actually comes from one of the smallest herons, the green heron, which has learned to let their prey come to them. Green herons are one of the few species of birds that's been documented using tools. They'll literally use things like sticks or feathers or other bits of debris as bait, and they'll throw it into the water and wait for small fish to be attracted to the vibrations on the surface, and then they'll start picking them off. So they're literally fishing for their meals, which is absolutely insane if you think about it. As of right now, there are 7 heron species known to use bait in this way, but it's mostly green herons that are well known for actually fashioning their own tools, either breaking sticks into smaller pieces or grabbing shiny bits of trash left behind by humans. A lot of other herons that are known to do this are only taking advantage of when things are already falling into the water and attracting fish's attention. But without their intelligence, they would be at a major disadvantage. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, you have things like the ibises, and you can kind of tell by looking at them that there's not a ton going on behind their eyes, because these birds actually don't use their eyes to hunt. They're tactile feeders, so they're doing everything with their sense of touch. And that's why they have those super long, curved beaks that they can use to probe into the mud or water and find invertebrates or fish that are hidden in areas where they can't see. Ibis beaks may be oversized, but it's given ibises a major advantage, and in fact, the American white ibis we would consider to be one of the most successful wading birds in all of the United States. We see them literally everywhere out here, not just in good habitat, but in our backyard, in urban areas, downtown, in cities, literally anywhere with suitable habitat, you can see big flocks of ibises. But actually their cousin, the glossy ibis, is an even more accomplished world traveler, because they are the most widely distributed ibis species in the world. They can be found on every continent except Antarctica and in most countries within that range. Anywhere in the temperate or tropical regions of the world that has good wetlands, that is now suitable habitat for the glossy ibis. And even in our own lifetime, we've observed glossy ibises getting way more abundant in the northern US. And that trend is happening all over the world as they establish new breeding populations in places that historically they weren't able to live before. And that's really thanks to how versatile a feeding method tactile hunting can be. If there's enough habitat and prey around, they have the ability to find it. Generally speaking, the more difficult the challenges are that an animal faces, the crazier its evolution is going to get, and there's maybe no better example of that than one of the most specialized wading birds in the entire world, the roseate spoonbill. It's really no secret where these birds get their name from because they have those crazy spoon-shaped beaks, and it's a very useful hunting tool for them because their bills are super sensitive to pressure and vibrations. They have little organs that line their beaks that can detect even the faintest vibrations in the water, and that's actually why they have that spoon shape to begin with. It gives them more surface area to have more pressure-sensitive organs to make their tactile feeding even more effective. And what they'll do is stick their heads into the water and wave their beaks side to side to stir up the sediment. And they're focusing on much smaller prey items than a lot of the other birds out here. Things like little crustaceans, aquatic insects, and tiny fish as well. And interestingly, that focus on smaller crustacean prey is actually where they get their color from as well, because a lot like flamingos, when they eat lots of shrimp, they take in a couple different pigments like canthaxanthin and astaxanthin that they absorb into their feathers, which gives them that gorgeous pink color. The spoonbill's hunting method is so unique that other water birds have actually learned to take advantage of it. So what you'll sometimes see is as a flock of spoonbills moves through the water and kicks up all the sediment, other birds like egrets will follow behind them and catch any larger fish that disperse as the spoonbills move through. And all these little specializations in how they're hunting, what prey items they're really focusing on, is how you can have so many wading birds all living in the same place and not running out of food.
It's a great survival strategy, but the thing is, it only works if they have a large and healthy enough area of habitat to share. And for these birds, that's never a guarantee. Habitat loss is the biggest threat to wading birds across the world today, especially since the wetland habitats these species rely on get targeted for development because they're relatively easy to convert into agriculture. Wetlands are also super sensitive to pollution and climate change, which of course impacts the birds directly too. But historically, wading birds faced other threats that nearly drove many of them to extinction.
You'd never know it today, but a bit over 100 years ago, we almost lost pretty much all of our wading birds in the United States. And the best place to start telling that story is one of its main characters, the great egret. Now, this is a bird that almost anyone out there watching right now could probably see in their home area. The great egret is now one of the most widely distributed herons in the world, found on all continents except Antarctica, but believe it or not, here in the United States, they almost went extinct. In the late 1800s, decorating your clothing with bird feathers was a very popular fashion trend, so huge numbers of these birds were collected for their feathers to turn into hats or jackets or really whatever else they were wearing at the time, and that absolutely devastated their numbers across the United States and really throughout the Americas as a whole. The problem is, wading birds breed in very large groups, so it was easy for hunters to go out and slaughter literally thousands of herons and egrets at a time. And because bird plumes were extremely valuable, about the same price per ounce as gold at the time, they were in very high demand, so there were almost no checks on the hunting going on, and by the mid-1880s, up to 5 million birds per year were killed for the plume trade, and over 95% of Florida's wading bird populations were lost. At the height of this industry, you really couldn't find wading birds around any of Florida's major cities because they had been completely eradicated from those areas. And though they didn't understand it at the time, that had huge consequences for the ecosystem because when you remove all of those top-level consumers, everything else below them gets completely out of balance. So losing wading birds in these wetland ecosystems is as damaging as the removal of bears and wolves from their native ecosystems in other parts of the country. Now, luckily, their populations have significantly rebounded since then, but our question is, with so many new threats now facing our birds and the rest of the natural world, how do we stop this from happening again? One of the first and most important steps to protect any species is you need to monitor their populations, and we do that through life listing. That's why we're on this mission to document the most extreme animals around the world. It's basically our way of checking in on these species to see how they're doing, especially to do that over time. And one of our greatest life listing successes from this year was getting our first really good footage of reddish egrets, which you may never have heard of because they are the rarest and the least studied of all herons in North America. They have a very specific habitat. Reddish egrets are mostly a coastal species. They're living in tidal mudflats, mangrove areas, and because of that, they've always had a naturally small distribution. But after the plume trade pushed through, their numbers were reduced so significantly that they haven't bounced back quite the same way that all the other waders have. So for us, having the chance to get to document their wild behavior for ourselves is really encouraging to be able to say there are still reddish egrets moving around here in Florida. We do still need to focus on their protection, but the more people that are out here doing this, life listing for these animals and monitoring their populations, the better and faster we'll be able to work to conserve them. And that's really the power of life listing as an activity. Anyone can do it. You don't need a ton of special equipment or access to a particular place necessarily. You just have to have the interest in animals to go out and look for yourself. And that's why we want as many people as possible to join us in doing this. The cool thing about wading birds is no matter where you live in the world, you have some of them around you. That's why we keep emphasizing all these species that are found all over the globe now. Because if you have an interest in your local ecosystems and you want to understand them better and protect them, wading birds are a fantastic place to start. They're easy to find, it's not hard to figure out what they're doing if you spend some time observing them, and all of that data compiled together can be a very powerful resource for scientists, conservationists, and wildlife lovers alike to work to protect these animals into the future.
One of the most important skills to develop if you want to use life listing this way is to really understand how and why the animals you observe are doing the things that they do. And we've picked up a very interesting trick that you can use with almost any bird to learn a lot about their biology just by watching them. If you want to learn how that works, check out this video where we teach you the trick in depth and show you some fascinating birds from down in South America. And with that, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.